Ambassador Kethral stood on the bridge of the Divine Conquest and looked at the blue planet on the screen. He had seen many worlds in his long life. He had watched species kneel before the might of the Valanthi Dominion. He had accepted the surrender of kings and presidents and hive queens. But something about this small world made him pause. "Report," he said, his voice calm and cold. The science officer turned from her station. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among their kind. "The planet is called Earth, Ambassador. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They are young, very young. Their first spaceflight was only 200 of their years ago." Kethral made a sound of amusement. 200 years. The Valanthi had ruled the stars for 40,000 years. These humans were like children taking their first steps. "Technology level?" he asked. "Primitive. They have basic, faster-than-light travel. Simple energy weapons. Their largest warships are smaller than our escort vessels." The science officer paused. "Ambassador, they should not be a problem. Our fleet could destroy their entire military in less than a day." Kethral nodded slowly. Behind his ship, 300 warships of the Valanthi Dominion waited in formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to burn a continent. Together, they had conquered 17 star systems. They had never lost a battle. "Open a channel," Kethral commanded. "Let us introduce ourselves to these humans." The communication officer worked at his station. A moment later, he looked up with surprise on his face. "Ambassador, they are already hailing us. They detected our arrival and have been waiting for us to speak." This was unusual. Most primitive species panicked when they saw a Valanthi fleet. They ran or hid or sent desperate messages begging for mercy. But these humans had simply waited. "Put them through," Kethral said. The main screen changed. A human female appeared. She had dark skin and white hair, and she sat in a simple chair in a simple room. She did not look afraid. She did not look impressed. She looked at Kethral the way one might look at an unexpected guest who had arrived at dinner time. "I am Ambassador Kethral of the Valanthi Dominion," he announced. "Rulers of 17 star systems. Masters of the Outer Rim. We have come to offer your species a place in our great empire." The human woman nodded slowly. "I am Secretary General Chen Wei of the United Earth Government. Welcome to our solar system. We noticed your fleet 3 days ago when you entered our sensor range." Kethral felt a small flicker of surprise. 3 days? Their sensors had detected the fleet from that distance? He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. Technology could not overcome numbers. "You understand why we are here," Kethral said. It was not a question. "I believe so," Chen Wei replied. "You have come to conquer us, to add Earth to your empire, to take our resources and use our people as servants or soldiers." Kethral appreciated her directness. "You understand the situation clearly. This is good. It will make things easier. If you surrender now, we will be merciful. Your people will serve the Dominion, but they will live. If you resist." He let the threat hang in the air. Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking carefully about her next words. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. "Ambassador Kethral, I must ask you a question. In your 40,000 years of conquest, has any species ever said no to you?" The question was so unexpected that Kethral almost laughed. "Many have tried to resist. All have failed. The Dominion is supreme. This is the natural order of the galaxy." "I see," Chen Wei said. "Then let me be clear, Ambassador. Earth says no." Silence fell on the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at the screen. Kethral felt his 4 hearts beating faster. This tiny species, with their primitive ships and their young civilization, was refusing the Dominion? "You do not understand what you are saying," Kethral said slowly. "Look at your sensors. Count our ships. We have 300 warships in your system. Your entire fleet numbers less than 50 vessels. This is not a negotiation. This is an offer of mercy." Chen Wei smiled. It was a small smile, almost sad. "Ambassador, I have a message for you from the people of Earth. It is very simple. Go home. Leave our system. Do not return. If you do this, no harm will come to you or your fleet." Kethral stared at her. He had lived for over 500 years. He had negotiated with hundreds of species. He had never heard anything like this. "Is this a joke?" he demanded. "Are you trying to buy time? Do you think reinforcements will save you?" "We have no reinforcements coming," Chenwei said. "We need none. I am giving you a warning, Ambassador. A final warning. Take your ships and go home. Tell your masters that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them to find easier prey." Kethral felt anger rising in his chest. This human was insulting him, insulting the Dominion, insulting 40,000 years of glorious history. "Very well," he said coldly. "You have chosen death for your species. When we are finished, there will be nothing left of your civilization but ashes and memories." End transmission. The screen went dark. Kethral turned to his officers. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. "Battle formation," he commanded. "All ships prepare for combat. We will teach these humans the price of defiance." The fleet began to move. 300 warships spread across space in perfect formation, their weapons charged with deadly energy, their crews prepared for the slaughter to come. On the planet below, cities continued their normal business. People went to work, children went to school, families ate dinner together. They knew the aliens were coming. They knew war was about to begin. But there was no panic, no fear. The people of Earth went about their lives as if nothing unusual was happening. This confused the Valanthi officers greatly. They had conquered many worlds. They had seen species react to invasion in many ways, but they had never seen a species simply ignore them. "Ambassador," the tactical officer reported, "the humans are launching ships. 47 vessels, all smaller than our cruisers." Kethral watched the human fleet form up between Earth and the Dominion Armada. It was like watching insects prepare to fight a fire. Brave, perhaps, but utterly hopeless. "Destroy them," Kethral ordered. The divine conquest fired first. A beam of concentrated plasma crossed the distance between the fleets in seconds. It struck the lead human ship directly, and did nothing. Kethral leaned forward in his command chair. "Report. Why is that ship still there?" The weapons officer was frantically checking his instruments. "I do not understand." "Ambassador." The beam hit the target. Full power. It should have vaporized the ship completely, but our sensors show no damage. None at all. "Fire again," Kethral commanded. "All forward batteries." The divine conquest unleashed its full firepower. Dozens of plasma beams, missile salvos, and kinetic rounds poured toward the human fleet. Other Dominion ships joined the attack. The space between the two forces filled with enough destructive energy to crack a moon. When the light faded, the human ships remained, untouched, unharmed. They had not even moved. Fear began to creep into Kethral's hearts. This was impossible. This was against everything he knew about physics and warfare. No shield could stop that much firepower. No armor could survive such an assault. "Ambassador," the sensor officer shouted. "The human ships are moving. They are coming toward us." The human fleet advanced. They moved slowly, almost casually, closing the distance between themselves and the Dominion Armada. As they flew, a transmission came through on all frequencies. It was Secretary General Chenwei again. Her face was calm, but there was something in her eyes now. Something cold and hard. "Ambassador Kethral," she said. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn why Earth said no." The human ships opened fire. Kethral had never seen weapons like this. There was no visible beam, no missile trail, no warning at all. One moment, a Dominion warship was there. The next moment, it simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if it had never been. "Evasive maneuvers," Kethral screamed. "All ships, scatter." The fleet tried to run, but the human ships were faster than anything the Valanthi had ever encountered. They moved through the Dominion formation like predators through a herd, and everywhere they went, ships disappeared. On the bridge of the Divine Conquest, alarms screamed. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. Ships were vanishing from the fleet register faster than anyone could count. "How many have we lost?" Kethral demanded. The tactical officer looked up with terror in his eyes. 112 ships, Ambassador. Destroyed in less than 2 minutes. And we have not damaged a single human vessel. Kethral felt the universe shift around him. In 40,000 years, the Dominion had never faced an enemy they could not defeat. They had weapons that could shatter planets. They had shields that could withstand the heart of a star. They were the masters of the galaxy. And these humans, these primitive children, who had only been in space for 200 years, were destroying them without effort. "Retreat," Kethral whispered. Then louder. "All ships, retreat. Jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here." The remaining Dominion ships tried to run. Their hyperspace drives powered up. Their navigation systems calculated escape routes. But something was wrong. The drives activated, but the ships did not move. They remained trapped in normal space, unable to flee. "Ambassador, our hyperspace drives are not working," the engineering officer reported, his voice shaking. "Something is blocking them. Some kind of field surrounds the entire fleet." The human ships continued their attack. 200 ships gone now, then 250. The mighty Valanthi fleet was being erased from existence. Kethral watched the destruction with growing horror. He thought about his homeworld. He thought about his family. He thought about the 40,000 years of Dominion history that would end here, in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, against an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. Then, suddenly, the attack stopped. The human ships pulled back. They formed a line between the remains of the Dominion fleet and Earth. They did not fire again. A communication request came through. Kethral accepted it with trembling hands. Secretary General Chen Wei appeared on the screen once more. She looked exactly as she had before. Calm, patient, unafraid. "Ambassador Kethral," she said, "you have 47 ships remaining. We have disabled your hyperspace drives, but we will release them shortly. You will be able to return home." Kethral could barely speak. "Why? Why did you stop? Why not destroy us all?" "Because we are not like you," Chen Wei replied. "We do not kill when we do not have to. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We only wanted to be left alone. You would not allow that. So we showed you what happens when Earth is threatened." "What are you?" Kethral whispered. Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. "We are human," she said finally. "We are young, as you said. We have only been in space for 200 years. But we have been fighting wars among ourselves for 10,000 years. We have had time to think about weapons, about defense, about survival. While your species was conquering the stars, we were learning how to survive against ourselves. Perhaps that is why we are different." Kethral did not understand. He could not understand. His entire worldview was shattered, and he did not know how to rebuild it. "Go home, Ambassador," Chen Wei continued. "Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them that any ship that enters our system with hostile intent will not leave. And tell them this: we wish no war with the Dominion. We wish no war with anyone. But we will defend ourselves. Always. Without mercy. Without hesitation." The transmission ended. Kethral sat in his command chair for a long time. Around him, his surviving officers worked in shocked silence. They collected escape pods from destroyed ships. They counted the dead. They tried to understand what had happened. Finally, the hyperspace drives came back online. The blocking field had been released, just as Chen Wei had promised. "Take us home," Kethral ordered. His voice sounded old and tired. The 47 surviving ships of the Valanthi fleet limped into hyperspace. They left behind the wreckage of 253 warships. They left behind the bodies of over 2 million soldiers. They left behind their pride, their certainty, their belief in Dominion supremacy. The journey home took 3 weeks. During that time, Kethral barely left his quarters. He spent hours staring out the window at the streaming lights of hyperspace. He thought about the human woman, Chen Wei. He thought about her calmness, her patience, her complete lack of fear. She had known. From the very beginning, she had known how the battle would end. She had tried to warn him. She had given him a chance to leave peacefully, and he had refused, because he could not imagine that a primitive species could defeat the mighty Dominion. When the fleet finally reached the homeworld, Kethral was summoned before the High Council. He stood in the great chamber where so many conquered species had knelt in surrender. He told his story. He showed the recordings from the battle. He described the weapons that could make ships simply disappear. The council listened in growing silence. When Kethral finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, the first among equals, the ruler of the entire Dominion, rose from his throne. He was ancient, over 2,000 years old, and he had seen the empire grow from a single planet to 17 star systems. He had never known fear in his long life, but fear was in his eyes now. "What do you recommend, Ambassador?" the first among equals asked. Kethrall took a deep breath. "I recommend that we never contact Earth again. I recommend that we declare their entire region of space forbidden. I recommend that we forget they exist and hope they forget about us." Murmurs of disbelief filled the chamber. The Dominion did not run from anyone. The Dominion did not hide from anyone. The Dominion was supreme, but the first among equals nodded slowly. "I agree," he said. "Send word to all our territories. The Sol system is forbidden. Any ship that approaches that region will be considered lost. The humans are not to be disturbed." 1 month later, a message reached Earth from the Valanthi Dominion. It was brief and formal. It acknowledged the misunderstanding during first contact. It expressed hope for peaceful relations in the future. It formally recognized Earth's sovereignty over its solar system and all surrounding space for a distance of 500 light-years. Secretary General Chen Wei read the message in her office. She smiled slightly and put it aside. There was other news that morning. News from across the galaxy. News about a great empire that had been humiliated by a primitive species. News about humans and their mysterious weapons. News about a small blue planet that had said no to the masters of 17 star systems. The Galactic Senate convened for the first time in 400 cycles. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss a single topic: the humans of Earth. "What do we know about them?" asked the Senate speaker. "Very little," admitted the chief intelligence analyst. "They are young. They are small. They have only 47 warships. And they destroyed over 250 Valanthi vessels in less than 30 minutes. Fear spread through the Senate chamber. The Valanthi were not the strongest power in the galaxy, but they were among the strongest. If humans could destroy them so easily, what chance did anyone else have? "What do they want?" someone asked. "Unknown. They have made no demands. They have not attempted to expand beyond their system. They simply asked to be left alone." The Senate debated for days. Some wanted to send their own fleets to test human defenses. Some wanted to offer alliance and friendship. Some wanted to declare the entire region around Earth as forbidden space and pretend the humans did not exist. In the end, they decided to wait and watch. They sent probes to the edge of human space. They listened to human communications. They studied everything they could learn about this strange young species. And slowly, a terrible realization began to spread through the galaxy. Something dangerous lived in the Orion Arm. Something that even the mightiest empires could not defeat. Something that had looked at the masters of the galaxy and simply said no. The humans were not interested in conquest. They did not seem interested in power or territory or domination. They only wanted to be left alone. But no one believed that would last forever. Sooner or later, the humans would turn their eyes outward. Sooner or later, they would want more. And when that day came, the galaxy would change forever. 3 years had passed since the Valanthi disaster. The galaxy had watched and waited. Spy probes circled at the edge of human space. Intelligence agencies collected every scrap of information they could find. Scientists studied the recordings from the battle again and again, trying to understand the weapons that had destroyed an entire fleet. But the humans did nothing. They did not expand. They did not threaten their neighbors. They built colonies on the moons of their own planets. They improved their ships. They went about their lives as if nothing unusual had happened. This confused the galaxy greatly. Every other species that had gained such power had immediately used it. They had conquered their neighbors. They had built empires. They had reached for the stars with hungry hands, but not the humans. They seemed content to stay in their little corner of space. They seemed to have no ambition beyond their own solar system. Some species found this comforting. Perhaps the humans truly wanted only peace. Perhaps they would never become a threat. Others found it terrifying. A species powerful enough to destroy the Valanthi fleet without trying, content to stay home and build. That was not natural. That was not how the universe worked. They must be planning something. The Galactic Trade Consortium watched the humans with great interest. The consortium was not a military power. They had no warships, no armies, no weapons of conquest. Instead, they had something far more powerful: money. The consortium controlled trade routes across the galaxy. They set prices for everything from rare metals to slave labor. They loaned money to governments and collected interest that would last for generations. They had brought more species under their control through debt than any empire had conquered through war. Director Voss Halen sat in his office on the consortium headquarters station and studied the reports about Earth. He was a mercanti, a species known for their business skills. His people had helped found the consortium thousands of years ago. They had built it into the largest economic power the galaxy had ever seen. Interesting, Voss muttered as he read the latest intelligence. Very interesting. His assistant, a young mercanti named Telia, looked up from her desk. Director? The humans have no interstellar trade, Voss explained. They have no connections to galactic markets. They have no access to standard technologies. They are completely isolated. Is that not what they want? Telia asked. Perhaps. But isolation is expensive. They must develop everything themselves. They must mine their own resources. They must build their own factories. Voss smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. And that means they are vulnerable. Telia frowned. Director, the Valanthi tried to conquer them. We saw what happened. The Valanthi used weapons, Voss said dismissively. We use contracts. Very different things. The humans may have weapons that can destroy fleets, but can those weapons stop economic pressure? Can they fight inflation? Can they shoot interest rates? He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, ships from 100 worlds moved through the station's docking rings. Trillions of credits flowed through this station every day. The consortium did not need to conquer anyone. They simply made themselves necessary. Prepare a trade delegation, Voss ordered. The finest ships, the best negotiators. We will offer the humans everything they could want. Technology, star charts, membership in the galactic community. And in exchange, we will ask only for fair trade agreements and modest protection fees. Protection fees? Telia asked carefully. Protection from what? Voss smiled again. From the dangers of the galaxy. Of course. Piracy, political instability, economic uncertainty. The universe is a dangerous place, especially for a young species. We are simply offering to help them navigate these dangers, for a reasonable price. 3 months later, a consortium trade fleet arrived at the edge of human space. 20 ships, each one a flying marketplace. They carried samples of goods from across the galaxy. They carried contracts written by the finest lawyers the consortium employed. They carried dreams of profit that made Voss Halen's 4 hearts beat faster. The humans greeted them politely. They allowed the fleet to enter their system. They welcomed the consortium representatives to Earth. Director Voss Halen himself led the delegation. He stepped off his shuttle onto a landing pad in a city called Geneva and looked around with interest. The city was pleasant enough. Trees lined the streets. People walked to work or rode in vehicles that floated above the ground. It was all very primitive by galactic standards, but not unpleasant. A human woman waited to greet him. She was tall and thin, with gray hair and eyes the color of steel. She wore a simple blue suit and carried no visible weapons. Director Halen, she said, extending her hand. Welcome to Earth. I am Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo. Voss took her hand carefully. He had studied human customs. A handshake was a greeting, a sign of good faith. He found the gesture oddly intimate. Thank you, Minister, he replied. The consortium is honored to begin negotiations with your species. Over the next several weeks, the negotiations proceeded. Voss was impressed by the humans. They were smart and careful. They asked good questions. They understood the value of what the consortium was offering. They also asked questions that made Voss uncomfortable. Tell me about the Valanthi Dominion, Minister Okonkwo said one afternoon. They were sitting in a conference room overlooking a lake. Sunlight sparkled on the water. Before they attacked us, what was their relationship with the consortium? The Valanthi are valued customers, Voss replied carefully. They purchase goods from consortium markets. They borrow money for their military operations. And when they conquer a new species, what happens? The consortium helps integrate the new territory into the galactic economy. We establish trade routes. We provide loans for reconstruction. We help the conquered species become productive members of society. Productive members, Okonkwo repeated. What does that mean exactly? Voss shifted in his seat. It means they contribute to the galactic economy. They provide labor. They pay their debts. And if they cannot pay their debts, then arrangements are made. Assets are transferred. Labor contracts are extended. Voss was sweating now. This was not how these negotiations usually went. Most species were so grateful for consortium attention that they signed whatever contracts were put in front of them. Director Hallen, Okonkwo said quietly, would you say that the consortium profits from war and conquest? I would say that the consortium provides necessary services during times of transition, and those services include loans at high interest to conquered peoples who have no choice but to accept. The interest rates are determined by risk assessment. Newly conquered populations are a higher risk. Okonkwo nodded slowly. She did not seem angry. She seemed thoughtful. This worried Voss more than anger would have. Let me tell you a story, Director, she said. Long ago, before humans went to space, there were organizations on Earth that worked much like your consortium. They loaned money to desperate people. They charged high interest. They took everything when the debts could not be paid. Do you know what we called them? Voss shook his head. Loan sharks. Predators. Criminals. Okonkwo's voice was still calm, still polite. We made laws against them. We protected people from their practices. We understood that some forms of business are simply wrong. Minister, I assure you that the consortium operates within all galactic laws. Laws that the consortium helped write, Okonkwo observed. Laws that protect consortium interests. Laws that allow the consortium to profit from the misery of others. She stood up and walked to the window. For a long moment, she looked out at the lake in silence. Director Hallen, I have a proposal for you. Not the proposal you came here hoping for. Something different. Voss felt his hearts beating faster. I am listening. Earth will trade with the consortium. We will buy your technologies. We will study your star charts. We will learn everything you can teach us about the galaxy. Excellent, Voss began, reaching for his contracts. I am not finished, Okonkwo said. We will buy these things, but we will not sell anything in return. We will not take your loans. We will not pay your protection fees. We will not become a part of your economic empire. That is not how trade works, Voss protested. It is how our trade will work, Okonkwo replied. We will pay fair prices for what we want, but we will not owe you anything. We will not be obligated to you in any way. Take it or leave it. Voss stared at her. In all his years as a trade negotiator, no species had ever made such a proposal. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was not how the galaxy worked, but he remembered the Volanthi fleet. He remembered the recordings of ships simply vanishing into nothing. He remembered the fear in the eyes of the first among equals. I will present your proposal to the Consortium Council, he said finally. The council debated for weeks. Many wanted to reject the human offer entirely. Who were these primitives to dictate terms to the consortium? But others pointed out that human money was still money. Human technology sales would still bring profit. And perhaps, in time, the humans would realize they needed more from the consortium. Perhaps they would become more reasonable. In the end, the council accepted the human terms. Trade began between Earth and the consortium. What happened next shocked everyone. The humans learned fast, terrifyingly fast. They bought consortium technology and took it apart, piece by piece. They studied how it worked. They improved it. Within 6 months, they were building their own versions that were better than the originals. They bought star charts and navigation data. Within a year, human ships were traveling routes that had taken the consortium centuries to map. They bought manufacturing equipment. Within 18 months, human factories were producing goods that matched consortium quality at half the price. Director Voss Hallen watched the reports with growing horror. This was not how it was supposed to work. New species were supposed to become dependent on consortium products. They were supposed to need consortium expertise. They were supposed to fall deeper and deeper into consortium debt until they had no choice but to do what they were told. The humans had broken the system. They had taken what they needed and used it to become stronger. They had not become dependent on anyone. This is impossible, Voss complained to Telia one evening. No species develops this fast. It takes thousands of years to reach their level of technology. They have done it in less than 2. Perhaps they were always capable, Telia suggested. Perhaps they simply lacked the knowledge, not the ability. Voss slammed his hand on his desk. They are cheating somehow. They must be. No one can learn this fast, but the humans were not cheating. They were simply human. They had brains that evolved to learn new things quickly. They had cultures that valued innovation and creativity. They had a history of solving impossible problems through sheer stubbornness and determination. And now they had galactic technology to study. 3 years after the first trade deal, Earth announced that they were closing their markets to consortium goods. They no longer needed to buy technology. They could make everything themselves. The same day, the human government announced that all consortium assets in the solar system were being nationalized. The consortium trading stations, the warehouses, the data centers that had been built in Earth orbit. All of it now belonged to humanity. They cannot do this, Voss screamed when he heard the news. This is illegal. This violates the trade agreements. He pulled up the contracts and began reading through them, searching for the clause that would allow the consortium to demand compensation. He found nothing. The human lawyers had been very careful. Every word had been chosen with precision. Every clause had been written to protect human interests. The consortium had been beaten at their own game. Director, Tilia said quietly, there is more. More? What more could there possibly be? The humans are building a fleet. Not warships, trading vessels. They are planning to establish their own trade routes through the galaxy. They are planning to compete with us. Voss felt the blood drain from his face. Competition. The consortium had not faced real competition in 3,000 years. They had always been able to buy out or destroy any rivals. But the humans could not be bought, and they certainly could not be destroyed. We must stop them, Voss said. We must find a way. But there was no way. The consortium sent lawyers to argue their case before the Galactic Senate. The humans sent their own lawyers, who argued better. The consortium tried to impose trade sanctions. The humans simply traded with species who wanted access to their technologies. The consortium tried to spread rumors about human products being dangerous or unreliable. The humans released independent testing data that proved their products were superior. Every move the consortium made, the humans countered. Every scheme failed. Every plan collapsed, and the humans kept building. They established trade relationships with species the consortium had exploited for centuries. They offered fair prices and fair terms. They did not charge protection fees. They did not demand interest on loans. They simply traded, honestly and openly. Species that had been drowning in consortium debt found new options. They could sell their goods to humans and pay off their obligations. They could buy human products without going deeper into debt. They could escape the trap that had held them for generations. The consortium empire began to crumble. Not through war or violence, but through simple economics. The humans offered something better, and the galaxy chose them. Director Voss Halen was called before the consortium council to explain his failures. He stood in the great chamber where he had once celebrated countless victories and looked at the angry faces of his colleagues. How did this happen? The council chairman demanded. We sent you to turn the humans into customers. Instead, they have become competitors. They have stolen our technologies, our markets, our clients. Explain yourself. Voss had no explanation. He had done everything correctly. He had followed all the standard procedures. The humans should have become dependent on the consortium, like every other species before them. The humans are different, he said finally. They do not respond to our methods. They learn too fast. They adapt too quickly. They cannot be controlled through debt or dependency because they refuse to be dependent on anyone. Then find another way, the chairman ordered. Use force if you must. Voss shook his head. We have no force to use. The consortium has no military. We have always relied on others to provide that. And after what happened to the Volanthi, no one will attack Earth on our behalf. No one. The council fell silent. For the first time in 3,000 years, they faced a problem they could not solve with money. They faced an enemy they could not buy or bankrupt. They faced a species that played by different rules. Then what do? The chairman asked quietly. We adapt, Voss replied. We learn from them. We become better. Or we die. The consortium did not die, but it changed. Over the following decades, it reformed its practices. It stopped the predatory loans. It lowered its interest rates. It began offering fair trade terms to all species. It had no choice. The humans were competing with them, and the humans were winning. The only way to survive was to become more like them. On Earth, Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo watched the changes with quiet satisfaction. She had not planned any of this when she first sat down with Director Voss Halen. She had simply wanted to protect her people from exploitation, but the results had been better than she could have imagined. The consortium had been humbled. Species across the galaxy had been freed from debt. A new era of fair trade was beginning, and Earth had barely tried. A message arrived from the Galactic Senate. It was a formal complaint filed by the consortium, accusing Earth of unfair trade practices. The irony was not lost on Okonkwo. She filed the message without responding. There were more important things to worry about. Human ships were now traveling throughout the galaxy. Human goods were being sold on 100 worlds. Human ideas about fairness and freedom were spreading like fire through dry grass. The galaxy was changing. The old powers were weakening. The oppressed were finding their voices. And at the center of it all, one small blue planet continued to grow stronger, not through conquest, not through war, simply by offering something better. Some species called it the human trade revolution. Others called it the beginning of the end for the old order. But on Earth, they called it something simpler. Good business, and they were just getting started. In the halls of the Galactic Senate, representatives whispered to each other about the humans. They had watched the Valanthi fleet destroyed. They had watched the consortium humiliated. They were beginning to wonder what the humans would do next. Whatever it was, they were certain of one thing. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had looked at the masters of the stars and refused to kneel. They had looked at the engines of economic exploitation and broken them. They had looked at the way things had always been done and simply said no, and no one could stop them. The Krethax hive mind had existed for longer than most species could imagine. It had no beginning that anyone remembered. It had no history that anyone had recorded. It simply was, and it had always been. 1 billion years of hunger stretching back into the darkness of time. The hive mind was not like other species. It did not negotiate. It did not trade. It did not form alliances or sign treaties. It only had one purpose: to feed. It moved through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Entire civilizations had been devoured. Countless worlds had been stripped to bare rock. The hive mind took everything and left nothing behind. No one knew how many Krethax there were. Billions. Trillions. Perhaps more. Each one was small, no larger than a human hand. They looked like insects with too many legs and mouths full of needle teeth. Individually, they were nearly mindless, but together, connected through the hive mind's vast consciousness, they became something terrible. The hive mind had noticed the humans. It had watched the Valanthi fleet burn. It had observed the consortium's humiliation. It had seen this small species from a small planet defy the powers of the galaxy. And it had felt something new, something it had not felt in a very long time. Interest. The hive mind did not fear the humans. It had existed for 1 billion years. It had consumed species with weapons far more advanced than anything the humans had shown. It had survived threats that made the Valanthi fleet look like toys. Whatever the humans could do, the hive mind was confident it could survive. But there was something else. Something about the humans that drew the hive mind's attention. They were small, like the Krethax. They had evolved on a single world, like the Krethax. They had spread across their star system and were beginning to reach for others, like the Krethax had done long ago. In a strange way, the hive mind saw something familiar in humanity, something that reminded it of its own ancient past. Perhaps that was why it decided to devour them. Perhaps it wanted to consume that familiar spark. Perhaps it was simply hungry. The hive mind began to move toward Earth. Human deep space sensors detected the swarm 3 months before it arrived. At first, the operators thought their equipment was malfunctioning. The readings made no sense. They showed millions of contacts moving through space in perfect formation, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. When the full scope of the swarm became clear, even the most experienced officers felt fear. How many? Admiral Chenwei asked. She had been Secretary General during the Valanthi attack, but she had since returned to military service. She preferred the simplicity of warfare to the complexity of politics. We cannot get an exact count, her sensor officer replied. The swarm is too dense, but our estimate is between 5 and 7 billion individual organisms. Chenwei was silent for a long moment. The Valanthi had brought 300 ships. The humans had destroyed them easily. But this was something different. This was not a fleet. This was a living tide, vast beyond imagination. What do we know about them? She asked. They are called the Krethax. They are controlled by a single consciousness called the hive mind. They have been active in the galaxy for at least 1 billion years. In all that time, no species has ever successfully defended against them. They simply overwhelm everything through numbers. Weapons? Each individual organism can spit a highly corrosive acid. In sufficient quantities, it can eat through any known material. The swarm as a whole can also generate electromagnetic pulses that disable technology. Chenwei nodded slowly. This was bad. Very bad. The weapons that had destroyed the Valanthi fleet were designed for ship-to-ship combat. They could erase a warship from existence, but they could not fire fast enough to stop billions of individual organisms. "Get me a connection to Earth Command," she ordered. "We need to have a conversation about Project Prometheus." Project Prometheus had been born in the years following the Valanthi attack. Human scientists had studied the weapons that had saved Earth, trying to understand how they worked. What they found had terrified them. The weapons were not human. Not entirely. They had been discovered, buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a structure that was at least 300 million years old. Someone had visited Earth long before humans evolved. Someone had left behind technology that defied everything humanity understood about physics. Human scientists had spent decades studying the alien devices. They had learned to activate some of them. They had learned to aim them, but they did not understand how they worked. The principles behind the weapons were simply beyond human science. Project Prometheus was the effort to change that. The best minds on Earth had been brought together to unlock the secrets of the ancient technology. They had made progress. Slow and painful progress. They had learned things about the universe that challenged everything they believed. And they had built new weapons. Weapons based on principles they barely understood. Weapons that could do things that should have been impossible. Now, with the Krethak swarm approaching, those weapons would be tested for the first time. Admiral Chenwei stood on the bridge of the human flagship, the Earth's Resolve, and watched the swarm approach. On the display screens, it looked like a dark cloud spreading across the stars. Billions of organisms moving with a single purpose, coming to consume everything she loved. "All stations report ready," her executive officer announced. "Project Prometheus is online and awaiting your command." "What exactly are we activating?" Chenwei asked. She had been briefed on Project Prometheus, but the scientists had struggled to explain their work in terms she could understand. "The scientists call it a reality anchor," the XO replied. "It creates a field that stabilizes the laws of physics. Within the field, certain things become possible that should not be possible anywhere else." Such as moving stars." Chenwei turned to stare at her XO. "Moving stars? You mean actual stars, like our sun?" "Yes, Admiral. The technology allows us to manipulate gravitational fields on an enormous scale. We can move objects that should be immovable. We can change the shape of space itself." Chenwei thought about this for a long moment. The implications were staggering. With such power, humanity could reshape the galaxy. They could create new solar systems. They could destroy old ones. They would be limited only by their imagination. "Does the hive mind know about this?" she asked. "We do not believe so. The technology has never been used outside the solar system. The Krethaks have no way of knowing what we can do. Then let's keep it that way for as long as possible." Chenwei turned back to the display screens. The swarm was closer now. She could see individual organisms on the enhanced images. They were horrible things, all teeth and claws and hunger. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Let's see if we can talk to them." The communication officer worked at his station. After a moment, he looked up with confusion on his face. "Admiral, I'm getting a response, but it's strange. It's not coming from any single point. It seems to be coming from the entire swarm at once." "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled with static. Then a voice emerged. It was not a normal voice. It sounded like millions of voices speaking in perfect unison, creating a single word at a time. "We are the hive mind." Chenwei felt a chill run down her spine. She had faced enemies before. She had fought in wars and seen terrible things, but she had never felt anything like the presence she sensed now. The hive mind was vast beyond comprehension. It was old beyond understanding, and it was utterly alien in a way that made even the Valanthi seem familiar. "I am Admiral Chenwei of the United Earth Defense Force," she replied. "You are approaching our territory without permission. I am ordering you to stop." Silence. Then the terrible chorus of voices spoke again. "We do not Stop. We consume. It is our purpose. If you attack Earth, you will be destroyed, Chen Wei warned. The hive mind made a sound that might have been laughter. It came from millions of throats at once, a horrible chittering that filled the bridge speakers. Many have said this. All have been wrong. We have existed for 1 billion years. We have consumed species with weapons beyond your imagination. You are young. You are small. You will be food. Last warning, Chen Wei said quietly. Turn back now, or face the consequences. We will consume your worlds. We will devour your children. We will feast on your memories. And when you are gone, we will forget you ever existed. Chen Wei closed her eyes for a moment. She had tried. She had given them a chance. It was more than the hive mind deserved, but it was what humanity believed in. Always offer peace first. Always give the enemy a chance to walk away. But some enemies would never walk away. Some enemies could only be stopped one way. End transmission, she ordered. Then to her weapons officer, activate Project Prometheus. Target the center of the swarm. Deep in the heart of Earth's resolve, ancient machines hummed to life. Power flowed through circuits that human engineers barely understood. Reality itself began to bend around the ship, stretching and twisting in ways that defied normal physics. On the display screens, something appeared in the center of the Krethax swarm. At first, it looked like a point of light. Then it began to grow. It became a sphere, then a larger sphere, then something so bright that the sensors could not properly display it. What is that? Chen Wei asked. We've created a localized pocket of altered space, her science officer explained. Within that pocket, we've changed the physical constants. Things that should happen very slowly are now happening very quickly. We've essentially created a small star from the ambient matter in the swarm. The new star expanded. Billions of Krethax organisms were caught in its blazing embrace. They burned instantly, reduced to ash and then to nothing. The swarm tried to scatter, but the star was growing too fast. It consumed everything within millions of kilometers. Then it did something impossible. It began to move. The star accelerated toward the densest part of the swarm, sweeping through the Krethax formations like a broom sweeping aside dust. Wherever it went, organisms died. The swarm that had seemed infinite was being thinned, carved apart by a weapon that should not exist. The hive mind's voice came through the speakers again. This time, there was something different in its tone, something that might have been confusion or fear. This is not possible. You cannot create stars. No species can do this. We're not creating it, Chen Wei replied calmly. We're moving it. Watch carefully. On the display screens, the star changed direction again. It curved through space in a way that defied gravity, following a path that no natural object could follow. It was being controlled, guided, aimed like a weapon. The hive mind fell silent. For the first time in 1 billion years, it faced something it could not understand. The laws of physics that governed the universe, the rules that had allowed the hive mind to survive and grow for countless ages, were being broken right in front of it. How? The hive mind demanded. How are you doing this? Chen Wei smiled grimly. We found something, buried on our planet, something very old, something left behind by a species that existed before you were born. And we learned how to use it. She leaned forward in her command chair. This is your final warning. Leave our system, leave our region of space. Never return. If you do, we will destroy every last one of you. We have the power, we have the will, and we have absolutely no patience left for species that think they can consume everything they see. The swarm hesitated. Billions of organisms paused in their advance, waiting for guidance from the hive mind. They had never hesitated before. They had never needed to. The hive mind had always known what to do, but now the hive mind was uncertain. It had seen the impossible. It had watched stars move. It had felt millions of its children burn, and it understood, with terrible clarity, that the humans could do much worse. We will return, the hive mind said finally. We will find a way to defeat you. If you return, you will die, Chen Wei replied. All of you. Every single organism. We will hunt you through the galaxy. We will burn your spawning grounds. We will erase you from existence. Do you understand? There will be no second chance. There will be no negotiation. There will only be extinction. The hive mind was silent for a long moment. The swarm continued to hover at the edge of the solar system, damaged but not destroyed. Billions of organisms still survived. The hive mind still commanded vast power, but it had felt fear. For the first time in a billion years, it had encountered something it could not simply consume. Something stronger than itself. Something that had looked at its endless hunger and simply said no. We understand. The swarm began to withdraw. Slowly at first, then faster. Billions of organisms turned and fled, retreating from the solar system, retreating from the region of space around Earth. They did not stop until they had put 3 entire galactic sectors between themselves and humanity. On the bridge of Earth's resolve, Admiral Chen Wei watched them go. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had not shown it during the confrontation, but she had been terrified. The hive mind was vast and ancient and powerful. If Project Prometheus had not worked, if the weapons had failed, humanity would have been devoured. But the weapons had worked. The humans had won. Stand down from battle stations, she ordered. Begin recovery operations for any damaged ships, and get me aligned to Earth. The government needs to know what happened here. The news spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Krethak's hive mind, the terror of 1,000 civilizations, had been turned back by the humans. Not just turned back, humiliated. They had fled from a species that had only been in space for 2 centuries. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy scrambled to understand what had happened. They studied the sensor data, transmitted by spy probes. They analyzed every scrap of information they could find. What they discovered terrified them. The humans had moved a star. They had created matter from nothing. They had bent the laws of physics to their will. This was not advanced technology. This was something else entirely. This was power on a scale that no known species possessed. The Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species crowded into the great chamber, shouting over each other, demanding answers. What are they? Someone cried. How can they do these things? They are not natural, another voice insisted. No species evolves this kind of power. They must have found something. Someone must have given them this technology. Does it matter? A third representative asked quietly. Whatever the source of their power, they have it, and they have shown they are willing to use it. What do we do now? No one had an answer. The galaxy had never faced anything like this. The old powers had always been able to contain any threat through force or economics or politics, but the humans could not be contained. They had weapons that defied understanding. They had defeated every enemy sent against them. They were growing stronger every day, and the most terrifying part? They still showed no interest in conquest. They had not demanded territory from the Valanthi. They had not tried to destroy the consortium. They had not pursued the hive mind as it fled. They simply defended themselves and went back to their lives. What did that mean? What were they planning? What would they do when they finally decided they wanted more? The questions kept the galaxy awake at night. The answers, if they existed, remained hidden behind human smiles and human patience. On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work, children went to school, families gathered for meals and holidays. The crisis was over, and most humans simply moved on with their lives. But in secret facilities around the world, scientists continued their work on Project Prometheus. They were learning more every day about the ancient technology. They were building new devices, new weapons, new tools that would make humanity stronger. And they were asking questions. Who had built the original devices? Why had they been left on Earth? What had happened to the species that created them? Were they still out there somewhere, watching? The answers remained elusive. But the humans kept searching. They kept learning. They kept growing, somewhere in the depths of space. The hive mind brooded. It had fled from Earth, but it had not forgotten. It was old and patient, and very, very hungry. Perhaps, given enough time, it would find a way to overcome the humans. Perhaps it would discover the secret of their power. Perhaps it would return, but not today, not tomorrow, not for a very long time. The humans had earned their place among the stars. They had faced the greatest terror the galaxy had ever known and stood their ground. They had shown the universe that humanity was not to be trifled with, and this was only the beginning. 20 years had passed since the hive mind fled from Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The old powers still held their thrones, but their grip was weakening. Something new was rising, and it bore a human face. It began quietly. A human colony here, a trade agreement there. Nothing that seemed threatening. Nothing that demanded attention from the great empires and federations that ruled the stars. The first colony was established on a world called New Haven, 300 light-years from Earth. It was a small world, barely habitable, circling a dim red star. No one else wanted it. The humans settled it anyway, building domed cities and underground farms. Within 5 years, New Haven was thriving. Then came New Hope, then Frontier, then Horizon. Human colonies spread through the galaxy like seeds scattered by the wind. They appeared in forgotten corners of space, on worlds that other species had dismissed as worthless. The humans did not care. They built homes wherever they could find room. The Galactic Senate watched with growing unease. Human expansion was not aggressive. The humans did not take territory from other species. They did not demand tribute or submission. They simply settled empty worlds and minded their own business. But the pattern was troubling. The humans were everywhere now. Their ships traveled the trade routes. Their merchants sold goods on 100 worlds. Their language was becoming the common tongue of commerce. Without firing a shot, without threatening anyone, humanity was becoming one of the most widespread species in the galaxy. Senator Vethka of the Olani Collective studied the expansion maps with worried eyes. The Olani had been a major power for 10,000 years. They controlled 40 star systems and commanded fleets of thousands of warships. But looking at the maps, Vethka felt something she had never felt before. Uncertainty. They are surrounding us, she said to her advisors. Not with weapons, with colonies, with trade routes, with influence. They pose no military threat, one advisor replied. Their fleet is still small compared to ours. Is it? Vethka asked sharply. We saw what they did to the Valanthi. We saw what they did to the hive mind. Do you really believe their fleet is as small as it appears? The advisor had no answer. They are building something, Vethka continued. Not an empire. Something else. Something we do not understand. And by the time we figure out what it is, it may be too late to stop them. She was right to be worried. The humans were building something, but it was not what any of the old powers expected. It started with the Talani. They were a small species, only 3 colonies, living under the oppressive rule of the Valanthi Dominion. For centuries, they had served as laborers and soldiers for their masters. They had no rights. They had no hope. They existed only to serve. Then a human merchant ship arrived at their world. The captain, a woman named Maria Santos, spent a week trading goods and learning about the Talani. What she learned made her angry. This is wrong, she told her crew. These people are slaves in everything but name. The Valanthi take everything they produce and give nothing back. What can we do about it? Her first officer asked. We cannot fight the Dominion. No, Maria agreed. But we can help the Talani fight for themselves. She began smuggling. Not weapons, ideas, books about human history, stories about revolutions and freedom movements, guides to organizing resistance, information about legal systems and rights and democracy. She gave the Talani something they had never had before: knowledge. Other human merchants did the same on other worlds. They visited the oppressed and the forgotten. They shared stories and information. They planted seeds of change wherever they went. The old powers did not notice at first. What harm could a few books do? What threat could ideas pose to empires that had lasted for thousands of years? But ideas are dangerous things. They spread from mind to mind, growing stronger with each generation. They cannot be killed with weapons or stopped with walls. They are the most powerful force in the universe. On Talani Prime, A young leader named Kethri read the human books and dreamed of a different future. He organized meetings in secret. He spread the ideas to others. Within 10 years, he had built a movement that spanned all 3 Talani colonies. Then came the day of rebellion. The Talani rose up against their Valanthi masters. They seized control of their own governments. They declared independence, and when the Valanthi sent ships to crush them, they found the humans waiting. Not human warships, human witnesses, human reporters, human diplomats who broadcast everything to the entire galaxy. The Valanthi Dominion is about to commit genocide, the human ambassador announced on every communication channel. They are sending their fleet to murder billions of innocent people whose only crime is wanting freedom. The galaxy is watching. History is watching. What you do next will define you forever. The Valanthi hesitated. They were used to crushing rebellions in secret, far from the eyes of the galaxy. But now, everyone was watching. Every species, every government, every citizen with access to a communication screen was seeing what they did. In the end, the Valanthi withdrew their fleet. They could not risk becoming known as murderers before the entire galaxy. The Talani won their independence without a single shot being fired, and the humans had shown what they could do without using any of their terrible weapons. They had used something far more powerful: the truth. The same pattern repeated across the galaxy. Oppressed species learned about freedom. They organized, they resisted, and when their masters came to crush them, the humans were there, watching and recording and broadcasting. The old powers began to panic. Their empires were built on exploitation. They needed slave labor and tribute, and fear to survive. But fear was fading. The oppressed were learning that they did not have to submit. They were learning that there was another way. The Galactic Senate held emergency meetings almost every month now. The great powers accused each other of weakness. They blamed each other for failing to stop the humans. They proposed military action, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation. Nothing worked. The humans were too popular. Too many species saw them as heroes. Any attack on humanity would unite the galaxy against the attacker. We cannot fight them directly, Senator Vethka admitted during one heated debate. They are too strong, and too many species support them. We must find another way. What way? Demanded a Valanthi representative. They are destroying everything we have built. Every day, more species join their side. Every day, we grow weaker, while they grow stronger. We destroy them from within, Vethka replied. We send assassins. We sabotage their ships. We spread lies about them. We turn their allies against them. The plan was approved unanimously. The old powers would work together for the first time in history to destroy their common enemy. They would use every tool at their disposal: spies, saboteurs, propaganda, murder, whatever it took to stop the humans. The first assassination attempt came 3 months later. A bomb was planted on a human colony ship carrying families to a new settlement. 3,000 people died, including 600 children. The galaxy waited for the human response. Surely, now the humans would unleash their terrible weapons. Surely, now they would burn the worlds of those responsible. Instead, the humans announced an investigation. They tracked the bomb to a Valanthi intelligence agent. They presented their evidence to the Galactic Senate. They demanded justice through legal channels. The Valanthi denied everything. The Senate refused to act. The humans' allies were outraged, but the old powers had enough votes to block any resolution. 3 weeks later, the Valanthi agent who had planted the bomb disappeared. His body was never found. Neither were the bodies of his 3 supervisors, his commanding officer, or the 7 politicians who had approved the operation. No one knew how the humans had done it. There were no witnesses, no evidence, no traces. The Valanthi officials simply vanished one night and were never seen again. A message arrived at the Valanthi capital the next morning. It was unsigned, but everyone knew who had sent it. Justice has been served. Do not test us again. We do not forget. We do not forgive. But for those who choose peace, we will be the best friends you ever had. The assassination attempt stopped. The sabotage stopped. The old powers pulled back, terrified of what the humans might do next. But the humans did not attack. They did not invade. They simply continued what they had been doing all along: building, helping, spreading ideas of freedom and justice wherever they went. The coalition of free worlds formed quietly, without announcement or ceremony. It began as a loose alliance of species that had been freed from oppression. They traded with each other. They defended each other. They shared technology and resources and ideas. The humans did not lead the coalition. They did not want to. Instead, they served as advisors and protectors. They offered their help to anyone who wanted it and asked for nothing in return. Within 5 years, the coalition had grown to include over 200 species. Many of them had been slaves or subjects of the old powers. Now they were free, independent, and growing stronger every day. The Galactic Senate watched the coalition with fear. Here was the threat they had always worried about. The humans were not building an empire for themselves. They were building an alliance that could challenge the entire established order. We must act now, Senator Vethka urged. Before it is too late. We must unite our forces and destroy the coalition while we still can. With what forces? Another senator asked bitterly. Half our client species have joined the coalition. Our armies are half the size they were 20 years ago. And even if we gathered everything we had, could we defeat the humans? Could we even slow them down? No one answered. They all knew the truth. The humans had changed the game. Military power meant nothing when your subjects refused to fight. Economic strength meant nothing when everyone traded with your enemies. The old powers still held their thrones, but their kingdoms were crumbling beneath them. On Earth, the human government met to discuss the future. The old leaders had given way to new ones, but the policy remained the same: help others, ask nothing in return, and never compromise on justice. President David Okonkwo, the grandson of Trade Minister Sarah Okonkwo, studied the reports from across the galaxy. The coalition was growing. The old powers were weakening. Everything was going according to plan. But there was a problem. The Senate is preparing something, his intelligence director reported. We do not know what exactly, but all the major powers are involved. They are pooling resources, sharing intelligence, coordinating in ways we have never seen before. A military strike? Okonkwo asked. Possibly. But it may be something else, something more subtle. They know they cannot defeat us in open warfare. They may be planning something different. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The humans had always known this day would come. The old powers would not give up without a fight. They would try everything to stop the changes sweeping the galaxy. Increase security on all coalition worlds, he ordered. Double our intelligence gathering, and prepare our ambassadors. I think we are about to receive some visitors. He was right. 3 weeks later, a delegation from the Galactic Senate arrived at Earth. They came not with weapons but with offers. They wanted to negotiate. The humans agreed to meet them. The negotiation took place in Geneva, in the same building where Trade Minister Okonkwo had once confronted Director Vos Halen. The Galactic delegation included representatives from every major power: Valanthi, Olani, Mercanti, and a dozen others. They sat across the table from President Okonkwo and his advisors, and they made their offer. We will recognize the independence of all coalition worlds, the lead negotiator said. We will end all economic sanctions. We will sign treaties guaranteeing free trade and free passage. In exchange, we ask only that humanity limit its expansion. No new colonies, no new alliances, no new interference in our internal affairs. Okonkwo listened carefully. It was a generous offer. By galactic standards, the old powers were willing to give up a great deal to stop the changes that threatened them. But it was not enough. Tell me, Okonkwo said quietly, what happens to the species still under your control? The ones who have not yet joined the coalition? Will they remain slaves? Will they continue to suffer? The negotiator shifted uncomfortably. Internal matters are the concern of each individual power. We cannot dictate how others treat their subjects. Then we have nothing to discuss. Okonkwo stood up from the table. Humanity did not come to the stars to build an empire. We came to make things better, not just for ourselves, for everyone. If you are not willing to change how you treat your subjects, then we cannot make peace with you. You would risk war over this? The negotiator demanded. Over the fate of species you have never even met? Yes, Okonkwo replied simply. We would. The delegation returned to their masters with nothing. The old powers raged and threatened, but they did not attack. They had seen what the humans could do. They knew they could not win, and so the galaxy held its breath. The old order was dying, but it had not yet fallen. The new order was rising, but it had not yet won. Both sides watched each other across the void, waiting to see who would blink first. The humans did not blink. They continued building, continued helping, continued spreading their ideas of freedom and justice. They knew that time was on their side. Every day, the coalition grew stronger. Every day, the old powers grew weaker. Sooner or later, the balance would tip. Sooner or later, the old order would fall. And when it did, humanity would be there to help build something better. Not because they wanted power, not because they wanted glory, simply because it was the right thing to do. That was what the galaxy still did not understand. The humans were not conquerors. They were not empire builders. They were something far more dangerous. They were idealists. They believed in things like freedom and justice and equality. They believed that everyone deserved a chance to live in peace and dignity, and they were willing to do whatever it took to make that vision real. The old powers had faced many threats over the millennia. They had survived invasions and plagues and economic collapses, but they had never faced anything like this. They had never faced a species that wanted to change everything. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity really was, and nothing would ever be the same again. 50 years had passed since humanity first met the Valanthi. The galaxy was unrecognizable. Half the old empires had collapsed. Their former subjects had joined the coalition of free worlds, which now included over 500 species across 3,000 star systems. Trade routes that had once been controlled by ancient monopolies were now open to everyone. Slave markets that had operated for millennia had been shut down. The balance of power had shifted so dramatically that even the most optimistic human predictions had been exceeded. And still, humanity had not conquered anyone. Not a single species, not a single world. They had won by building, by helping, by showing that there was a better way to exist among the stars. The remaining old powers gathered in secret. They met on a neutral station far from any settled world, in a region of space that belonged to no one. 12 species sent their highest leaders, emperors, prime ministers, supreme counselors, and hive queens. Together, they represented the last remnants of the galactic order that had existed for countless thousands of years. Senator Vethka of the Olani, now ancient and tired, looked around the chamber at her fellow rulers. She had spent her entire career fighting the humans. She had watched every strategy fail. She had seen everything she believed in crumble to dust. "We have lost," she said simply. "It is time to accept this truth." The Valanthi Emperor slammed his fist on the table. "We have not lost. We still command powerful fleets. We still control wealthy worlds. We can fight." "Fight who?" Vethka asked wearily. "Fight the humans? We saw what happened to your fleet. We saw what happened to the hive mind, and that was 50 years ago. 50 years of human advancement. Do you think they have grown weaker since then? Then we fight the coalition," the Emperor insisted. "The humans protect them, but they cannot protect everyone at once. We strike their allies, force the humans to spread themselves thin. And then what?" a Mercanti trade lord asked. "Even if we won, what would we gain? Burned worlds and dead populations. The very subjects we hope to reclaim would be destroyed in the fighting." The chamber fell into bitter silence. They all knew the truth, even if they did not want to say it out loud. The old ways were finished. The question was not whether they would fall, but how. Vethka spoke again. "There is only one option left. We go to the humans and surrender. Not on a battlefield. At a negotiating table, we offer them everything they want, and we hope they are merciful." "Surrender?" the Emperor spat. "The Valanthi do not surrender. We have never surrendered in 40,000 years. Then the Valanthi will be the first to fall," Vethka replied coldly. "The rest of us will make peace while we still have something to offer." The debate continued for 3 days. Some refused to accept the reality of their situation. Others could not imagine a galaxy where they were not supreme. But in the end, necessity won over pride. The old powers agreed to send a delegation to Earth. They would ask for terms. The delegation arrived in human space 3 weeks later. 12 ships, each one carrying the most powerful ruler of its species. They were escorted by human warships through the solar system, past the colonies on Mars and the stations around Jupiter, until they reached Earth itself. President Maria Chen greeted them on the surface. She was the great-granddaughter of Admiral Chen Wei, who had turned back the hive mind half a century before. She had her ancestors' calm eyes and patient smile. She was 73 years old, and she had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. "Welcome to Earth," she said as the delegation stepped off their shuttles. I hope your journey was comfortable. The Valanthi Emperor looked around at the blue sky and green trees with barely concealed contempt. This small world, with its primitive beauty, had brought the mightiest empires in the galaxy to their knees. He could not understand how. We have come to discuss terms, he said stiffly. Then let us discuss them, President Chen replied. She led them to a conference hall that had been prepared for the occasion. It was a simple room, with windows overlooking a garden. There were no symbols of power, no displays of wealth, no reminders of human military might. Just comfortable chairs and a table with water and refreshments. The delegates took their seats. President Chen sat across from them, with her advisors arranged behind her. She did not look triumphant or arrogant. She looked the way she always looked, kind, patient, and utterly certain of what she wanted. Senator Vethka spoke first. President Chen, we have come to acknowledge reality. The old order is dying. We cannot stop the changes sweeping the galaxy. We ask only for mercy. Spare our peoples. Allow us to maintain some dignity. We will give you whatever you want. What do you think we want? Chen asked quietly. The delegates looked at each other in confusion. This was not how negotiations usually worked. The victor made demands. The defeated agreed or faced destruction. That was how it had always been done. We assumed you would want territory, Vethka said. Resources, tribute, perhaps revenge for the wrongs we have done. We want none of those things, Chen replied. The confusion deepened. Then what do you want? Name your price. Take our territories. Accept our surrender. Just tell us what will make you stop. President Chen reached into her coat and withdrew a slim document. She placed it on the table in front of the delegates. It was written in simple language, translated into every major galactic tongue. This is what we want, she said. Not territory, not wealth, not revenge. Just this. Senator Vethka picked up the document with trembling hands. She read the title aloud. The Universal Charter of Sentient Rights. Read it, Chen encouraged. Take your time. The delegates read. The document was not long, but every word carried weight. It established basic rights for all sentient beings, regardless of species. The right to life, the right to freedom, the right to speak and think and believe without fear, the right to participate in decisions that affected their lives, the right to be treated with dignity. This is impossible, the Valanthi Emperor said flatly. Our empire is built on hierarchy, on service, on the proper order of species. If we implement this charter, everything falls apart. Your empire is already falling apart, Chen replied. This charter does not destroy anything. It simply recognizes what has already become true. The oppressed will no longer submit. The slaves will no longer serve. You can fight this reality, or you can accept it, but you cannot change it. And if we refuse? Vethka asked. Chen's expression did not change. Then we continue as we have been. We help the oppressed. We shelter the refugees. We spread ideas of freedom wherever we go. Eventually, your empires collapse entirely, and your peoples are left to rebuild without any guidance or protection. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Or, she continued, you sign the charter. You begin reforms. You treat your subjects as equals, instead of servants, and in exchange, humanity offers something we have never offered anyone before. Partnership, full access to our technology, full membership in the coalition, full protection against any external threat. You would share your weapons? The Valanthi Emperor leaned forward, suddenly interested. The weapons that destroyed our fleet? The weapons that turned back the hive mind? Not weapons, Chen corrected. Technology. Medicine that can cure any disease. Energy systems that can power worlds forever. Construction methods that can build habitats in the void of space. We have developed wonders that could benefit every being in the galaxy. But we will not share them with empires built on suffering. The delegates were silent. They had come expecting demands for tribute and territory. Instead, they were being offered something far more valuable, but with conditions that challenged everything they believed. How do we know you will keep your word? Vethka asked. How do we know you will not use this charter to weaken us, then conquer us when we are vulnerable? Chen smiled gently. Senator, if we wanted to conquer you, we would have done it 50 years ago. We have the power. We have always had the power. We could have burned your worlds. enslaved your peoples, built an empire greater than any the galaxy has ever seen. We chose not to. We chose to help instead. We chose to build instead. We chose to wait until you were ready to change. Why? The Emperor demanded. Why would any species do this? What do you gain from helping others? Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. Long ago, before we reached the stars, humans nearly destroyed ourselves. We had wars that killed millions. We had technologies that could have ended all life on our world. We came within a hair's breadth of extinction, more than once. But somehow, we survived. We learned. We grew. She looked at each delegate in turn, meeting their eyes. What we learned was this: the only way to truly win is to help everyone else win too. Empires built on oppression always fall. Economies built on exploitation always collapse. Only cooperation, only mutual benefit, only genuine respect for others leads to lasting prosperity. We did not come to the stars to repeat the mistakes of our past. We came to build something better, something that would last. A beautiful philosophy, the Emperor said, his voice dripping with contempt. But the galaxy is not a classroom. It is a battlefield. The strong take from the weak. That is the natural order. Perhaps it was. Chen agreed. But natural orders can change. Evolution does not stop. The universe is billions of years old, and it will exist for billions more. Who knows what the natural order will be 1,000,000 years from now? 1,000,000,000 years from now? We believe it can be something better than endless conflict. We believe intelligent beings can choose something different. She stood up from her chair and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was full of flowers from 100 different worlds, brought to Earth by the species humanity had helped. A living symbol of what cooperation could create. You have a choice, Chen said, her back to the delegates. You can cling to the old ways, watch your empires crumble, and be remembered as the last tyrants of a dying age, or you can embrace the future, join us in building something new, and be remembered as the leaders who had the courage to change. She turned back to face them. But know this: we will not stop. Whether you join us or oppose us, humanity will continue on its path. We will help the oppressed. We will shelter the refugees. We will spread freedom wherever we go. Nothing you do can prevent that. The only question is whether you will be part of the future or buried by it. The delegates requested time to consider. They were given private rooms and access to communication with their home governments. For 3 days, they debated among themselves and consulted with their advisors back home. Some argued for rejection. They could not imagine giving up power, even power that was already slipping away. They preferred to fight and lose than to surrender and survive. Others saw the opportunity. The humans were offering partnership, not domination. They were offering technology that could solve problems the old powers had struggled with for millennia. All they had to do was treat their subjects with basic decency. In the end, necessity won again. On the 4th day, the delegates gathered in the conference room. One by one, they signed the Universal Charter of Sentient Rights. Even the Valanthi Emperor signed, though his hand trembled with rage as he did so. President Chen watched each signature with quiet satisfaction. 50 years of work had led to this moment. 3 generations of humans had dedicated themselves to this goal. They had sacrificed and struggled and waited, knowing that one day the galaxy would be ready to change. That day had arrived. Thank you, she said when the last signature was complete. I know this was not easy. Change never is. But I promise you, the future will be worth it. Together, we will build something magnificent. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The old powers had signed the charter. The age of empires was over. The age of cooperation had begun. On thousands of worlds, beings who had lived as slaves celebrated their freedom. Chains were broken. Prisons were opened. For the first time in their lives, billions of sentient creatures saw a future that was not defined by suffering. The coalition of free worlds expanded to include everyone. Former enemies became partners. Ancient grudges were set aside. The galaxy began the long process of healing from millennia of conflict and exploitation, and humanity continued to grow. Not through conquest, but through contribution. Human scientists shared their knowledge. Human engineers helped build new infrastructure. Human doctors healed the sick and taught others to heal. Human teachers spread ideas that had taken humanity thousands of years to learn. The final entry was made in the Galactic Codex, the great record of galactic civilization. It was written by the combined representatives of over 1,000 species, and it would be remembered forever. Sol system and all human territories are hereby declared off-limits to unauthorized contact, by order of the Galactic Senate, by request of no one. Violation is not prohibited. It is simply inadvisable. The humans do not forget. The humans do not forgive. But for those who choose peace, the humans will be the greatest friends the galaxy has ever known. Beneath the text, in 100 languages, a human phrase was inscribed. We came in peace. We will leave you in peace. But never mistake our kindness for weakness. President Chen read the entry on the day it was published. She was sitting in her garden, surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds. She was old now, her hair white and her hands unsteady, but her eyes were still bright, and her smile was still warm. Her grandson sat beside her, a young man just beginning his career in the diplomatic corps. He had read the entry too, and he was bursting with questions. Grandmother, why did they write it that way? It makes us sound dangerous. Chen laughed softly. We are dangerous, child. We have weapons that can move stars. We have technologies that can reshape reality. Any species with such power is dangerous, but we would never use them aggressively. We only defend ourselves. True. But the galaxy needed to understand something important. Kindness is not the same as weakness. Mercy is not the same as helplessness. We could have conquered them all. We could have built the greatest empire the universe has ever seen. We chose not to. That choice makes us strong, not weak. She looked up at the sky, where starships moved against the blue like silver fish swimming through an endless ocean. The old powers feared us because they could not understand us. They thought strength meant domination. They thought power meant control. They could not imagine a species that had the ability to rule everything and chose to rule nothing. Do you think they understand now? Her grandson asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Some do. Some never will. The universe is vast, and there will always be those who believe that might makes right. But we have shown them another way. We have proven that cooperation can work, that kindness can be powerful, that the galaxy can be better than it was. She reached out and took her grandson's hand. That is our legacy, child. Not empire. Not conquest. Not fear. Hope. We gave the galaxy hope. And as long as that hope survives, everything we have done will have meaning. The years passed. President Chen died peacefully in her garden, surrounded by her family. She was mourned by a galaxy that had learned to love humans, even if they still did not fully understand them. But her work continued. Her grandchildren took up the cause, and their grandchildren after them, generation after generation of humans, working to make the galaxy a little better than they found it. The Codex entry remained, a permanent reminder of what humanity was. Dangerous and kind, powerful and merciful, capable of destroying worlds but choosing to build them instead. And across the galaxy, species who had once trembled in fear now raised their children with stories about the humans. Stories about a small blue world that had said no to the masters of the stars. Stories about a species that had changed everything. Not through war, but through hope. They called it the human age. And it was only beginning. Far away, in the depths of space, the hive mind watched. It had waited for 50 years, growing stronger, learning from its mistakes. It had not forgotten the humans. It had not forgiven them. Someday, perhaps, it would return, but not today. Today, the humans were too strong. Today, the galaxy was united behind them. Today, there was hope, and against hope, even the hive mind could not prevail. The stars burned on, as they always had and always would. Civilizations rose and fell. Species were born and died. The universe continued its endless dance of creation and destruction. But on one small blue world, circling an ordinary yellow star, something special had happened. A species had reached for the stars and found something greater than power. They had found purpose, to help, to build, to hope. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and it would never be forgotten.